And welcome everybody. SF Live episode 108. Happy Monday, everybody. Thanks for joining us here live. My name is Kai Hoffman. I'm the CEO of the Soar Financial Group. In a couple seconds, I'll be joined by Paul Harris. He's the editor Americas for the Mining Journal. He is a regular guest on the weekly Kitco podcast. He hosts his own conference, the Colombia Gold Symposium in Medellin. This year it was virtual. Usually it is physical. And we're going to talk about South America, ESG, CSR, trends he sees and witnesses. He's a very active and engaged writer in this space, so he sees a lot, makes a lot of observations. And that's why I want to use, or remind you to use hashtag AskPH. That's Paul Harris on Twitter. Get your questions in, anything specific. Paul lives in Medellin, so he's got firsthand knowledge of the area, and make sure to use that as well. Ask him what's burning under your fingernails. Follow us on YouTube, follow us on Twitter, leave a like, hit the alert and subscribe button, and you get notified when we go live with another update. Leave a comment, as I said. Let us know what you think. Let us know your thoughts. Be happy to get back to you on that. Now, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Mr. Paul Harris. Paul, thanks for joining us today. As I said, you're a regular guest on the weekly Kitco podcast. You're the editor of America's Mining Journal. You host your own conference. You live in Medellin. Like, how do you do it?
Morning, Kai. I've worked for myself. I've pretty much worked for myself on and off for the best part of 20 years. So always looking for work, always looking for projects, always looking to be engaged. And this year with COVID-19 and being, housebound, so to speak, I work at home office without having to go to conferences or site visits. There's just been more time to do more things. And as the precious metals prices have picked up, there have been more companies doing more work. So there's more things to sort of write about and talk about and comment on.
Exactly. Like, as you said, I presented at your conference. We talked about money flows flowing into South America, but also in general, North America as well. And we're going to talk about South America in a minute. Like, I really want to get your perception there. And you're based in Medellin. Give us first, what is Colombia like these days? Like, we don't often have guests from Colombia on the show. So give us a feel. Like, what is it like right now?
Well, in terms of COVID-19, I mean, it's experiencing the same things as pretty much everywhere else. So both in terms of the spread of the virus and also the economic impacts. So the government the economy is not locked down. Economies, people can still go out and do things, but with the precautions about wearing masks and things of that nature. And so as I say, it's similar to other jurisdictions, really.
Yeah, and as I said, you're based in Medellin, obviously, but and I remember you used to go on quite a few site visits just from Medellin. That's obviously slowed down and hasn't happened in the last 8 months, 9 months. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, I haven't really been out of the house, just to the supermarket, pretty much. In the last site visit was, I guess, in March, a visit to Nicaragua.
Okay, yeah, no, and that sort of brings us also to South America in general. Like, how is it affecting the overall sector? You're seeing it firsthand basis. Like, what has changed now in South America? Or I'm generalizing. South America is a huge continent, right? It takes you forever to fly north to south, so there are nuances to it. But let's start Colombia and maybe zoom out then a little bit.
Well, I think in general, COVID has hit the continent very hard. Again, as in other places of the world, but the response from different countries and the impacts have been have been different. Overall, there has been a significant economic impact, but some countries have fared better than others. Chile, for example, the copper industry there is still producing similar amounts as last year and perhaps even more this year. Whereas in Peru, for example, the impact there has been much harder. In general terms, the governments of South America and Latin America do not have the financial resources to support their countrymen, to support their economies in the same way that Europe, Canada, the United States, Australia, other parts of the world do. So there has been a very real economic impact. And mining, of course, has been one of the sectors that's been resilient, has continued to generate income, and to a greater or less extent, can be part of the solution to help rebuild the economy, to help rebuild rural economies.
There's a lot of information in there that we should unpack here, and mining being an essential part of the overall recovery process. Do you see certain governance or initiatives already implemented? Like, and I'm looking at Peru, and like permitting has been extremely slow during COVID, and some companies are still waiting for permits, or like are almost scared to hand in their permit application because they don't know what's going to happen. Do you see anything in that regard?
I I think governments recognize the role that mining in general can have to help rebuild economies, particularly regional economies, but haven't really seen a great deal about governments looking to accelerate permitting of things of that nature to really accelerate project development. One of the I mean, it's difficult for them to do one because Latin America tends to be very bureaucratic, and as part of that, there is also an idiosyncrasy whereby people think that if something is done more efficiently, it must be because corners are being cut or bribes are being paid or something of that nature. And so it is a very curious idiosyncrasy here in this part of the world that people think that efficiency means the job isn't being done properly. There isn't the same level of vigor or vigilance
And it's like I
or
think we had that
standards.
conversation before as well. Like government employees sort of are liable almost for their actions as well. Like even if you're a low-level government employee, you're sort of liable if you gave let's say approved a permit or mine construction or something. You're almost personally liable for the consequences of that action. Is that true as well?
In Colombia, yes, that is the case. That public officials can be personally liable for decisions they make long after they leave office, and so that let's say at the very least causes them to think two or three times before signing anything to make absolutely sure that there's going to be no comeback for them going forward.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense, and that's maybe part of the bureaucracy because there's a lot of cover your ass involved as well, obviously, and that's
Absolutely,
what
yeah.
slows things down tremendously as well. Let's look at the different countries, and we've seen a lot of money flowing into South America this year. Of course, the mining sector has been on the rise, and it's like I got my presentation from your conference here open. Argentina, Colombia, Peru, and Argentina to different degrees because I think Fortuna raised a lot of money for building. I forgot the name of the mine. I had it on the. It starts with an L.
Oh yeah, Lindero, yeah.
That's I think what it is. Yes. So that's why Argentina is ranked first right now. Otherwise, they'd probably be in between Chile and Brazil there. But like, what do you see in South America? What kind of trends are you seeing? What regions are hot? Who responded maybe even the best as well?
It's a very much a mixed bag. I mean, several countries have got one or two sort of landmark projects, and just to sort of go through a few, Ecuador, London Gold started producing last year. Obviously, it's got the Sol Gold project. Nicaragua, you had the Calibri mining acquisition of the B2 Gold assets, and they're developing those and advancing those. Guatemala, you've got Bluestone Resources and Cerro Blanco, which it's in the process of sort of building out. Colombia, the Buritica gold mine that's about to come into commercial production, and there's a handful of other projects. Then, of course, in the bigger mining countries, Peru and Chile. Chile's got a whole host of projects. So is Peru. Argentina's got a lot of projects coming through, and sort of gold. It's got some big copper projects, and also on the lithium side. So there is, in general terms, a lot going on, but it is quite sort of dispersed amongst the different countries. It doesn't necessarily have the same depth as Canada does, or the provinces in Canada, or even in the United States. So it very much is sort of country specific, and we can get into that a bit more if you like.
Yeah, I'd like that actually because I want to zone down or focus down a little bit more on areas or regions that are attracting a lot of attention. Sort of like in Canada, Newfoundland is extremely hot right now.
Yeah.
What do we see? What are similarities or similar areas in South America?
Well, I think in a broad strokes, go back sort of 10 years to the sort of last cycle. Latin America got a lot of attention because there was perhaps a perception that permitting in Canada and the US was getting too hard, and it was perhaps more feasible in Latin America. So Ecuador really got a lot of investment, a lot of exploration. Colombia was the hottest exploration jurisdiction in the world for a good few years. But then the social issues, the social license to operate became much more complicated and more challenging. And so I think in recent times, we've seen a reverse of that. The environmental regulations may be sort of stricter and tougher in Canada and the US, but they're more certain. The process is more certain. And so I think a lot of mining investors have gone back to those jurisdictions because of the certainty. They can deal with the toughness. It just means the bar's raised, but they've got the certainty of the timescales and what the process is. In Latin America, the social license to operate has got tougher. The overall bar has got higher as well, but there's an uncertainty on the timescales. When you go into a process, you've no idea really when you're going to come out. That's certainly the case here in Colombia and to a lesser extent in Ecuador. But it's also getting tougher in places like Peru and Chile. And again, particularly with the social license to operate, many of these countries have significant indigenous populations, which under ILO 169, they have the right to prior consultation about economic activities in their area of where they are. And so that's, to a greater or lesser extent, has been a real brake on mining investment because it's really slowing down that permitting process, that approvals process.
Interesting. Again, there are a lot of things we can go back on, and one thing CSR and ESG is something I want to dive in just a little more deeper. But you mentioned Colombia, for example, is experiencing a lot of difficulties in that regard, and I think that's reflected also in the Fraser Institute ranking. They're 17th only. They're almost at the bottom of the table for South America right now. Well, why is Colombia being held back like that?
Colombia. Colombia has a mining history in general terms, going back hundreds of years, but it doesn't really have much of a modern mining history. And so large-scale modern mining is still a relatively new concept to people. There's also there's a lot of different interest groups in Colombia, ranging from the armed groups, the criminal mafia groups, and obviously there's NGOs, environmentalist NGOs. So there's a lot of people vying for public attention, vying for political influence, and that makes a very challenging environment for mining projects. Miners obviously don't want to get involved with politics, generally speaking, but there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of competition for the ears of the communities who they're trying to show their credentials to about why they should be there and be allowed to develop a mine. And so it creates a very tough environment for them.
Okay. ESG and CSR, like you touched on it, social license to operate is becoming more and more important, like as it should.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the argument here. But as you said, the irrationality to a degree can be a factor. We've just seen it with Regulus in Peru as well, arguing about water contamination on the other side of a mountain. That's not even part of a drainage system. How does the perception in general differ? Like you said, investors are looking more at stable, safe jurisdictions like Canada or the US for investment. I'm trying to just get a better feel, what can maybe as an investor, what can you do? How can you allocate your dollars there? How can you hold the companies even more accountable?
Well, I think, again, in general terms, a lot of companies do a very good job with ESG or CSR. It's more demanding here. Companies, generally speaking, have to do more, go extra miles than a similar project in Canada or the US. Part of that is because in many rural areas there's a lack of state presence. And so things like school, health systems, aqueducts, water systems, electrification can be lacking. The state hasn't put them in. And so part of the ESG, CSR approach has to embrace these things. Because if a project can't help the development of a community, what's in it for the community? It goes beyond just the paying of royalties. And there are companies that do a very good job of that. We mentioned earlier on Lundin Gold. They've done a great job around the Fruta del Norte project. They've received awards from the United Nations for what they've been doing. The Buritica project, which was formerly Continental Gold, now is Zijin Mining. Again, a leading light. They've done excellent work. They continue to, because the task is really convincing communities or showing communities how their lives and their future development can be better with the project. They have to go a lot deeper and make many more commitments in order to get there.
We often look at the junior exploration side of things, of course, not really the producers. That's out of my realm oftentimes. But how does an investor sort of find out what a company is doing in terms of ESG? You can put a lot of things on a PowerPoint, and it's very PowerPoint. You can put everything on there, but how does an investor actually verify what's happening? How do you make it easier for an investor to find out what's going on?
Well, that's a very good question. Companies, generally speaking, are very proud of what they're doing and the success and the progress they're making. So, as you mentioned, they have it in their corporate presentations. They typically have in-depth CSR, ESG section on their website. But taking a step back, one of the issues the sector as a whole faces is this very question: how to show people what they're doing and how to show it in a way that's credible, how to measure and compare. And there are various different initiatives underfoot or underway to help to do that, to be able to compare one project with another, to go beyond just what the GRI reporting principles are, to be able to, so companies can better show both investors, host governments, and host communities what they're doing, what it means, and how that stacks up with everybody else. So that's still very much in process of development, but it is coming.
Okay. What's your favorite jurisdiction right now in South America?
Ooh, that's a very good one. I don't know. It's very different. I love copper, so sort of Chile and Peru. Copper powerhouses. There's a lot of development going on there. For gold, obviously I've got a bias towards Colombia. There's a handful of big projects here. I've been really impressed with the way that Nicaragua's developed and grown and continues to attract investment. Ecuador's a jurisdiction with challenges, but again, the way the government has managed to sort of turn itself around and enable investment again, I think has been quite impressive. Still got a lot of challenges. Got a presidential election coming up early next year, and there's going to be another referenda on or public consultation, popular vote on whether mining should be banned or not in Cuenca province. So it's a continually moving playing field.
Yeah, no, it is. It's quite exciting, especially on the politics side of things, right? And as you said, Peru, for example, 3 presidents within 4 weeks or something like that. So it's quite exciting.
Yeah.
A presidential election in
I mean,
April.
I guess that's one of the differences from North America. Here, mining is never that far away from politics, in a good or bad way.
Yeah, no, that's true. And like as you can in Peru or so, like the families are involved all over as well. They're politicians, but also major miners as well. There's always that connection, right? Let's zoom out. Like we talked about South America quite a bit, and let's zoom out further. Like you're the editor Americas for the Mining Journal, so you also cover North America, North American exploration companies. And I just want to ask you more about general sector trends. You look at everything, and I don't need I want a gut analysis, right? Like what do you see right now? Like what is sticking out? Like what does your gut tell you where we headed?
I think we're headed, as you mentioned earlier, this year there's been a lot of money raised. You mentioned some of the money raised for Latin America, but there's also been a lot raised for exploration in Canada and the US. The message I think coming through this year is investors really want exploration companies to be aggressive, drill more meters, make more discoveries, prove up more ounces, and get through those processes of resource estimate and then into PEA, pre-feasibility and feasibility. They really want that value chain the companies to move through the value chain. At the same time, I think another trend, all roads lead to M&A. The need to be relevant, the need to sort of bulk up, to capture investor interest, to capture perhaps the interest of majors. So we're seeing sort of more sort of mergers of equals all through the value chain. This was started a couple of years ago with Barrick Randgold and later on with Newmont and Goldcorp. But we're seeing it further down the value chain. Earlier this year, there's the conclusion of the Equinox Gold and Endeavour. Who was it? Was it Endeavour?
Equinox and
Yeah.
no, Endeavour and Teranga merged, so that's happening.
Lee Gold, sorry, Lee Gold Mining.
Legal, yes.
Sorry about that. And more recently, just this morning, Northern Vertex announcing a merger of equals with Eclipse Gold. So the smaller companies are starting to get together. And I think there's going to be a lot more of these kind of things. One trend that's only just starting to happen, and we are going to see more of this, the big companies need to replace their ounces. There hasn't been as much exploration as perhaps there should have been, but even so, the amount of money being spent on exploration isn't resulting in a corresponding amount of new ounces. So the big guys are going to have to buy the smaller guys. We've seen that with in November, Yamana Gold making a bid for Monarch Gold. there's going to be much more of that going forward. And I expect next year, as and when site visits can happen, once COVID travel restrictions are eased a bit more, I think we're going to see a lot more transactions coming through.
Okay. And again, you mentioned a couple of things I want to dive in a little deeper on. And you mentioned the word relevant. What is a relevant exploration company for you at this point? Like, how do you define relevant?
Well, that's a very good question as well. I mean, it's a company that's certainly got the funds to work aggressively for 12 to 18 to 24 months. So a company with 5, 10 to $20 million. I think the days where companies are, the days where companies are doing 1 million raises, those days have gone. Investors aren't really interested in those. They want, it's almost go big or go home. So you've got your geological thesis, you've got your idea. Companies have been able to raise money to test it, and investors want them to test it hard. Put up or shut up. So I think we're going to see the finance is still going to be there for those companies, but investors are going to want to see the results coming through. So you've talked before about the assay labs being backed up because of the amount of work. To a certain extent, that's a positive thing because it shows the work is being done. The labs are having to sort of bring on new staff to enable them to deal with the workflows, but the exploration companies are having to get the drill results out. They're having to advance their projects in a quicker way than they have done in recent years.
Yeah, and according to a BMO study, like the big U.S. or the big gold miners will produce roughly $90 billion of free cash flow until 2024. Like, where do you think they're going to allocate the capital? I have an idea, but what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think that creates a very interesting question because part of it is obviously going to be returns to shareholders through dividends. There's at the top end of the market, there's a dividend battle going on between all the big guys. The intermediate players are starting to pay dividends. They're starting to get into that game. Some of them are doing share repurchases. Some of that will obviously be on M&A or buying smaller companies. But there's an interesting sort of dichotomy there because the bigger companies are still very much acting under the sort of capital discipline that they were forced to engage with during the downturn, during the bear market. And to a certain extent, some people will argue that they're still holding to that too much. It's been too severe, the capital discipline, because they need to invest in their pipelines, which means they're increasing their spend on exploration. That's great, but it's not going to be quick enough. So they need to buy other companies. I'm not saying they need to start doing wacky premiums again, but they need to get the checkbook out. Otherwise, the viability of their companies could be threatened. And so capital discipline is perhaps bitten too hard.
Yeah, maybe to jump in there, maybe as a counterpoint, and like, have you seen companies, or the big mining companies, reevaluate their reserve base based on current gold prices, or at least upping their price tag, adding more ounces to the book than they had before?
Not yet. No, I mean the majors I've spoken to over the last few months, there's pretty categorically they're looking at maintaining that $1,250 an ounce. Maybe one or two are looking at bumping up to $1,350 an ounce. Obviously, in a few weeks' time at the end of the month, when a lot of them put out their annual reserve statements, we'll see. But I'm not expecting to see a lot or big price increases there. That's obviously something that they may come in the future. I think they're looking to see prices at sort of around near enough current levels for a longer period of time before they bump them up.
All right, last question, and that's probably an expensive one. What do you expect to happen in 2021?
As I say, I think there's going to be a lot of results coming out, a lot of drilling results coming out, a lot more economic studies coming out and companies advancing through. And consequently, there's going to be a lot more, I think there's going to be a lot more M&A. Not necessarily big premiums, but there's going to be a lot of mergers, smaller mergers of equals, but also the bigger guys gobbling up some smaller guys.
Awesome. Paul, thank you so much for joining us. It was really insightful talking to South America. Don't often have that expertise on here, so really appreciate that. Where can people find more about you? Like, where do you blog? Where do you write? How can they read your content?
Well, Mining Journal is www.mining-journal.com. My Twitter is CGS2020V, and the website is colombiagold.co.
Fantastic, Paul. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. We got to catch up in the new year, see what's happening, what kind of trends are developing.
Thanks very much, Kai. Happy holidays.
Happy holiday. That's right. Yeah, I keep forgetting it's Christmas season. Everybody else, thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Thanks for watching, and make sure to follow us on YouTube, follow us on Twitter, hit the subscribe, and alert button to get the latest updates directly as a push notification. Really appreciate it. Happy holidays. Talk to you soon.